Sarah Addison Allen said, "Happiness is a risk. If you're not a little scared, then you're not doing it right."
Hello, and welcome to the show, Colourful Conversations with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark. This week, we ask the question, why are risk takers so successful? Now, risk, it's something that we all deal with. Many are actually turned off by the very concept of taking a risk. It is actually easier and more comfortable to just sit down and take a safe spot. But this is what distinguishes the doers from the dreamers. Now, many risk takers are more likely to be successful because they are not just going to limit themselves to any given risk. They're going to put their energies in where other people may be hesitant. But of course, whilst we're going to talk about many risk takers, sometimes people go too far, and it doesn't always work out for the best. Here's a little poem to illustrate. It's called Faux Paw. Blair the Hare never gave a care. With every risk he wanted more. He leapt into danger with reckless flair until he made a big faux paw. In fields of folly was the farmer's glare, watching what he had in store, as Blair was then caught in a snare, and the hare would dare no more. So, Clergyman Pete, what in your opinion makes a successful risk-taker?
Well, it's a certain type of risk-taking. Risk-takers who succeed are not people who just take a risk for the sake of it. They take a risk because they feel that it's going to give them some advantage. They've got some reason for taking the risk. They enjoy taking the risk, but they've got to have a reason to do it. Now, someone who just gets a thrill from risk-taking, a buzz of adrenaline, you tend to get this sort of person maybe drinking too much, maybe being married and having affairs, or maybe getting involved in extreme sports, jumping out of helicopters with their nose attached to the rotors, that sort of thing, sort of thing that you do all the time. But but
every weekend.
A successful risk taker, the sort that we're talking about, is actually someone who plans. They want to take a risk, but they want to take a big risk, so they do it properly. They will plan, they will think, they'll strategize, and then they go for the risk, because this is the crucial thing. They're not afraid of failing, either because they just think it won't happen to them, or they think that if it happens, we can succeed next time. So there is that sort of level of arrogance. This sort of risk taking is evident that in high functioning psychopaths. That it's a trait of them. Not that I'm saying these all great successful risk takers are psychopaths, but this is a trait found in them, that they will take risks because they want to take risks, and they want to take a risk to be successful. The sort of risk that they like to take is one that will lead to success, and failure isn't a problem. And so with those things in place, if you're that sort of risk taker, then there's a chance that you'll fail utterly. There's also a chance that you'll be hugely successful. And that's why, you see, we don't see the big failures, maybe, but we see the big successful risk takers. But even in those cases, they've had failures too. So we can look at how they dealt with that failure and see that doesn't it knocks them back, but it doesn't knock them out of the game, whatever their game is.
Well, yes. Indeed, and if we take some very well-known people who have actually failed in business but have managed to pick themselves up, dust themselves down. So, for example, Peter Jones, who is noted, of course, for appearing on Dragon's Den, that long-running business entrepreneurial series where people pitch their ideas to a series of wealthy business people. Now, Peter Jones was initially very successful in his early days, but actually lost everything, and yet managed to learn. So one of the traits here is about learning from your errors and being able to pick yourself back up. Yeah. But they are definitely very bold. They are prepared to take risk, but it's calculated risk. So when we talk about the difference between somebody recklessly with gay abandon going into something, there is a clear difference between the type of caliber of individual who become successful. They gain knowledge. Effectively, they pursue success based upon the evidence that they've gained. And they're not afraid of failure. And I think this is the thing that does tend to separate people.
Yeah.
Richard Branson is another example, of course, and he is somebody who we would all see as being a successful businessman, somebody who is a billionaire, and got a very, very long track record of succeeding. But not everything has gone well. We take Virgin Trains and many other things. Perhaps that particular ticket hasn't gone as well as he probably would have planned. But if you look at the other ventures, what he's done is he has spotted a gap in a market. And I think that's the other thing as well, that risk takers do seem to be able to see things that others can't. Now, here's another point to make, and this is quite interesting purely on timing. So I'm going to start with the United Kingdom. Now, actually, ironically, some of the United Kingdom's largest taxpayers have been published. Now, Sir James Dyson, who is the entrepreneurial engineer, now he appears at number 3, ironically. I won't necessarily go into how much tax he pays, because I know it's clearly not as much as you, Clergyman Pete. However, now he, of course, has really founded his success on vacuum cleaning and household appliances. Now, of course, he also invented other things in his earlier career, because he invented the rollerball wheelbarrow. Now, what was interesting is that he found a spot in a gap in a market, but he was prepared to take risk. He put his own money behind it, backed his time and attention. And whilst that was a very niche field, he was prepared to invest and expand. He clearly is somebody who was prepared to put his ideas out in the open and make a difference. And I think that's the other thing as well. He was prepared to think big, as opposed to thinking small. And I think that's the other thing when we think about other big risk takers. Now let's look at the United States. Well, we know that one of our great heroes is Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump, whether you like the man or not, he has taken risks, many risks. He's put his whole reputation on the line to go for the presidency of the United States. He is now the president, and let's face it, he has taken risks throughout his entire term. He's not prepared to challenge the conventional. And that's another thing which I think is interesting about the different type of individual. And of course, there are many other individuals, but it's not just necessarily in business. People who do take risks, or to take risks in just general life, they're prepared to put themselves out into the community. Yeah. So I want to ask you, Clergyman P. So you've seen many people in you've seen people in your community actually put themselves out. They've taken risk, effectively sacrificing their own careers and possibly in some cases relationships for a worthy cause.
Yes,
so it's a risk in itself, but I wanted to sort of talk about that aspect.
Yes, well, I think that's a reasonable. I think you could put politicians in that. Yes. In that class of people, because in general, in fact, the majority of politicians at least enter politics because they think they can make a difference for the good, and they put their reputations on the line. Certainly, in terms of a religious situation, for example, going off to become a missionary, you can put your whole life on the line. You're going into a situation where you know you might die, but you think that it's worth it. And when we look at the Bible, the inspiration, the guiding textbook behind these things, I suppose, Proverbs 3 verse 5 is often quoted in this context. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding." It's not saying there's no understanding, but don't trust in your own understanding. Trust what God says. So what's happening in that case is risk taking. But it's risk-taking in the way that we've been talking about. It's risk-taking with a strategy. You're expecting that there could be failure, but if you you're trusting in God and His ways, the likelihood is success. And you can learn from the failure and try again, of course, but the assumption is not failure. The assumption is that there will be success. I suppose where this doesn't fall into quite the same category is what we're talking about when people are going off to become missionaries in difficult areas and that sort of thing. Is they would see death as martyrdom, so they're dying for their cause. So what would seem to be failure would still be success. So it's an odd sort of risk taking. The risk taking that they're really taking is whether or not they're going to be effective as ambassadors for the Lord. So in that case, they would see, and I would, having done that myself, see the not doing what God says as the greater risk. If you see what I mean, so that you're outside of God's will, there's going to be a greater risk. And I think that that's the same, though. I mean, I don't see that as being different. I think this sort of risk-taking would mean, take, for example, a famous risk-taker, Donald Trump, who was a risk-taker in his business career. And in fact, famously went bankrupt, of course, and used the bankruptcy system in order to come out again and try again in investment. But now, as you say, he's president of the United States. He's done very well. But he, because he's pursuing those sort of risks, hasn't taken other risks. For example, he doesn't drink alcohol at all, having seen that his brother fell prey to alcoholism. So it's not the risk takers take any sort of risk. There's a certain type of risk taker who will succeed. If it's a thrill seeker we're talking about, he's going to be prey to all sorts of risks. If it's specifically a sort of risk that's going to lead possibly to greater things, you might see them falling prey to gambling, but not getting addicted to gambling. You see, there's a difference there. So you could still really lose out, but you'll lose out if you do so in a big, impressive way.
Well, I think that's a really important point, because when we talk about successful risk takers as opposed to those who are very complete failures, is that for the gambling is an interesting one, because where do you, and then this is semantics maybe, gambling and risk taking. Yes. So taking the point that if you put in your coins in the slot machine in the hope that something will return, that is really an unsuccessful risk-taking, because there is no point of control. It's out of your control. Whereas if you look at somebody, and again, I'll pick an American, like Jeff Bezos, he took a gamble. He came away several years ago from his very well-paid role in the investment community. He was doing very well and decided to give up, and actually saw an opportunity to build a business. We all know what that is, and that Amazon is what it is now, one of the world's largest, if not the world's largest company. And of course, I'm sure that probably Jeff himself could never have imagined what kind of empire he was eventually going to build. But the point being is, he was prepared to take risk based upon his entrepreneurialism, his skills, the people he brought in. And I think one of the other things as well where risk takers succeed, so to answer the question, why are risk takers successful, is because they also bring in the right talent, i.e. they surround themselves with the right risk takers, with the right expertise, and they're not just simply purely gambling. And I think that this is where many people do fall foul of problems, where for the likes of many entrepreneurs who are out there in any part of the world, it's being able to do your due diligence. Jeff Bezos definitely did his due diligence. Yes. It was a risk. He could quite easily have failed, and he could never have actually got off the ground. But he started very small. He didn't overcommit himself, so it was all within control as much as he possibly could. Yeah. So I think that we're starting to sort of get a sense of the type of risk takers that are successful.
Well, I think we can move now to say, well, what can we learn from such people? Because if you do the opposite, you try not to take risks. Paradoxically, ironically, it's actually a greater risk. If you don't take any risk. Let's take an extreme example just to show the argument ad absurdum, to illustrate it. Take something that's really extreme. Say, for example, because you know that it's risky going out of your house, you've got to get run over, someone might knock into you, etc., etc. You never go out the house. You'll probably become fat and indolent and die of a heart attack. There's risks associated with it. I was talking about the missionary who will take a risk before, and saying, well, actually, the greater risk is not doing it. It's a similar idea. Now, in Matthew's Gospel, I'm just going to quote from Matthew 25, verse 29, "For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have in abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This follows a discussion of how if you're given something by God, you should invest it, take risks with it. It's an example using money, but it could be an ability that you had. You're meant to use it, which means taking a risk. And if you don't do that, you run the greater risk of not having it at all. So in this version, in this text, it's saying it'll be taken away from you. Well, you can lose everything by not doing anything. You could lose everything by doing things and taking risks. At least there's a chance of success if you take the risk. So we can learn from these guys who are ultra successful, who are risk takers, these strategic sort of risk takers, by seeing that if we take risks, even if we're risk averse in our personality, we can still make plans to take calculated risks, because we know it's better for us in the long run. And we can take steps now. Gentle listener, you can do that. Look at the way that you're running your life. Maybe you should go for that promotion or other job. Maybe you should take the plunge and marry that person you're in love with. Maybe you should take a step and make a calculated risk.
Well, yes. Now, many psychologists, to summarize, do actually profile risk takers.
Yes.
And primarily what they typically tend to summarize is they change. Now, there is nothing static with a risk taker. They attain more freedom and flexibility as they go about their business. And they're never found wanting as risks come to them. And they define a change and adapt wherever is necessary. So they're never stuck in a rut. Now, this is critical because essentially, granted that they do face some challenges, but they do not see that as being something which is a discomfort, and they will always pursue their goal to succeed. And by essentially coming out of their comfort zone and not remaining static, they will always bear this hallmark that if you want to change, if you need to change, they can adapt. And so particularly in this particular century, as we've highlighted, where times are moving very quickly, it's very difficult to remain static. Many people want some form of stability, but actually stability sometimes brings stagnation. And a risk taker is somebody who will always adapt and will always push the boundaries. So, like Blair the Hare, he was prepared to take a risk, and sometimes he was prepared to gamble too much. So, listeners, are you someone who's prepared to take risks, and how do you define risk-taking? What do you think makes a successful risk-taker? Why not let us know? Why not log on to markandpete.com and let us know your thoughts? Well, we're going to take a big risk now and ask you to just give us your thoughts. We'll read them out on the next show. So join us again next time for more colourful conversations with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark.